guys, welcome back to another episode of R&Dgarage. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and liking my videos. Today we're doing an oil change on a 2005 Lotus Elise. This is another car in our fleet. It is one of my favorites. You're probably like, well, every car you own is your favorite, which is true. It's a bit of a bucket list. But this one in particular is like a little go-kart, just corners like it's on rails, even in a straight line. It's really, really fun. Yeah, you know, there's not much I can say about this car that everybody else hasn't said already. It's awesome. So like I said, today we're doing an oil change. I've already got her up on the lift. When you put your car up on a lift, you're going to want to chalk the front tires, either the front tires or the rear, just to make sure that the car doesn't slide off once it's up. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that and be right back. These are the tools you're going to be using today. We have a torque wrench with a 14mm socket. We have a 14mm open-ended wrench, Phillips screwdriver, 2 T25 Torx. We have 2 Allen wrenches. One is 3mm, the other is 5mm. Couple of ratchets. This one is an 8mm socket, and this one has a 13mm socket. We've got the oil filter wrench. We've got the new washer for the oil drain plug. We've got 5-weight 40 oil. And we've got the K&N filter. Quick note about this, please make sure it's American made. So before I take this lift all the way to the top, I wanted to point out a couple things. So you guys know me fairly well by now. None of my cars remain stock. Well, the Lotus is no exception, of course. The US-based Lotuses all have their exhaust come through the splitter down below. Well, mine, I went for a more European look, and so mine come through the rear panel. So since that's the case, I have to take off this rear aftermarket splitter. And to do that, there's a bunch of small bolts here and in the front. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that and then lift her up. And as always, when working with carbon fiber, you just want to be a little bit careful of what you're doing. It is soft. Okay, those are done. Now we get to tackle the silver ones. And always make sure to stretch out your arms. It's so awkward just having your arms up forever. And I should have done that. I should have just been flexing my arms. Okay. Oh, actually, one more thing before I continue on the silver bolts. You're noticing I'm only using hand tools on this. No power tools. These little components plus the carbon fiber just kind of equals disaster if you reach for a power tool. You just want to be very careful. Okay, so you got to be patient with these. These had a little grit caught in them, so it took me a while to break them with the Allen wrench and fully pull it out. Okay, these are done. I'm going to leave this bolt, actually, no. Scratch that. I'm going to take this one off and I'm going to leave these two at the top before I remove the last of the bolts and then try to take it off. There we go. Put that right there. And I ended up switching halfway from the Allen wrench to the blue handled. It was just a little bit better. Yeah, it felt better in my hand. There we go. Okay, that one. And now we're going to go ahead and remove the last two bolts. I'm going to do obviously one at a time and see how it goes. So it looks like, I'm going to try to hold it up with my hand and do the other side as well. There we go. Camera guide to the rescue. Almost there. There we go. Okay, now it looks like it should, it's very light, thank goodness, and it should just slide right out. Perfect. Okay, I am going to lean it down like this. Perfect, and I'll be right back. So now we're ready to take off the under tray. The 8mm bolts on either side, there's 3 on each side, 6 altogether. They're very, very fragile. So if there's any point where you're ratcheting to take them off and they feel stuck, just stop. Take off your tool and then try it again because you don't want to break these off. Let's get started. Okay, now we need to get this one off and this one off, and we are good. Okay. Orange. Okay, now this should just slide out like that. Try not to bang shit stuff. Okay, there we go. We'll be right back. Now that the splitter is off, the under tray is off, now is a good time to look underneath the car and make sure everything is looking good. All the bolts are tightened, the CV boots aren't leaking or ripped right here. Those look good. And as you can see, I've already got my oil pan in place, or the drain pan in place. One thing great about Lotus/Toyota, everything is easy to uninstall, install. Everything is basically in the right place. Looking at you, Grandpa Truck. Okay, don't forget your glasses. I'm going to put those on right now, and we're going to go ahead and break the 14mm drain plug. So you'll want to do this so it's until it's loose. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and then, ooh, it's a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be. Okay. And before it gets completely loose, I'm going to use my favorite magnetic drain plug tool. Love this guy. There we go. And it may shoot out a little bit further than I expected, so I'm just going to compensate for that. Here it comes. There we go. Yep, come on. Oops. Oh, that's about to fall out right there. Come on, tool, don't do me wrong. There we go. Perfect. We're going to let this drain and be right back. Now we're ready to take off the oil filter. Now, a quick note about the filter I'm using. You can see it's K&N up there, and I'm going to be replacing it with a brand new fresh K&N filter. Now, I'm still working off a stash I have that were made in the USA. The new offshore K&N filters haven't really tested well, so I would actually recommend any filter but K&N unless you also have an American stash. Okay, let's get this thing off. There we go. It's pretty loose. And you don't want to do this super fast because remember there's going to be oil in the filter as well, like that. Also a good reason why you should be wearing gloves and glasses. Super dirty. Come on, filter. There we go. So now I'm just going to dump it in like that, and we're ready to move on. And thank you for the rag. So I've got my American-made K&N filter. Since the threads go up, I was able to basically pre-fill the filter up. So you can go ahead and do that. Before we put it on, I'm going to go ahead and wipe down the surface so that it's nice and clean. And also, before I put this on, I'm going to go ahead and take my finger and, well, you'll see. Okay. Wipe that off. And wipe where it's spilled. And that's still draining, so I'm not going to wipe that, but okay, this looks good. So like I've said, I've already pre-filled this. So now I'm just going to dip my finger in and kind of run it along the gasket. Like that. Guess you guys couldn't see me. Perfect. Okay, let's get this sucker in. And once you feel it tightening, which is good, turn it about 3/4 of the way, and then you're good to go. Okay, time to move on. So now that that's done, we're ready to put on the drain plug and the new washer. Now, I noticed the old washer, I took it off now, but it was stuck on the bottom of the pan, so be careful for that. So now we got a new washer. Put this together. Okay, and before we put it on, we're going to go ahead and wipe. You can see it's still a little bit drippy, so we want to make sure it's not completely wet when we put it on. Okay. And first I'm going to go ahead and finger tight. Okay, wipe my hands, and now I've got my torque wrench set to factory spec. Actually, I'm going to tighten it a little more. There we go. There we go. There you go. There's that beautiful sound. Okay, we're gonna put her down, fill her with oil, run her for a little bit, and then check everything again before we put all the splitter and under tray back on. So you can come along with us for some of that. So now we're ready to fill her with oil. Factory recommend is 5.40 pentazine. So that's what we're going to be putting in. So, and 4 quarts. Well, we're going to fill her up with 4 quarts. We already filled the filter up, as you remember. So then we're going to go ahead and run her for a little bit, check the level, and fill as necessary until the indicator is at full. Put this aside. Now I've got my Awesome Walker funnel in there. You still, even though it's threaded in, you still want to pour in the 4 quarts fairly slow because this is the last engine you want to have oil leak all over. Let's get started. Number 4. Beautiful. There's that. So I'm going to go ahead, take off the funnel, put the cap back on, and run the car until it gets a little bit up to factory spec in terms of warm, and check the level, see where it's at. Before I go ahead and check my dipstick after we now have a nice warm car, I want to let you guys know that it's really important that you don't put on the splitter and under tray until everything is done. You want to make sure while the car is warm, if there's any leaks under the car, you want to make sure obviously no spots of oil. So just something to look out for, because the last thing you want to do is have to struggle with those bolts more than you have to. Okay, and now moving on to the dipstick, which is another story in itself. So this is actually the American Lotus has a Celica GTS motor, and in the Celicas, obviously the motor is in the front of the car. Well, this is a mid-engine car, so the dipstick, you basically, when you pull it out, it kind of like goes around the block a little bit, so to speak. You kind of have to bend it and make sure that none of the oil flicks onto the body of the car. Blech. Okay, let's do this. So we're gonna pull on it to get it out. There we go. And then kind of bring the ring forward and feed it out with your other hand. And then be very, very careful when the end pops out. There we go. Okay, and obviously have a rag handy. Whew, so thankfully this reeds is full. So we are good. I'm gonna put the dipstick back in and we'll be right back. As you can see, the splitter and the under tray are back on. I didn't bother filming putting those back on because it's just a matter of reversing from what I did earlier. So this is great. There were no leaks underneath, perfect oil change. We're gonna take her down from the lift, drive her around, and check the dipstick one more time just to make sure everything's kosher. Anyway, you guys, thank you so much for liking my video, subscribing to R&Dgarage. I appreciate every single one of you, and keep commenting and let me know what you want to see next. And I promise you the FJ is coming. Thanks again, guys. Have a great week.